Right. Good morning. Good morning to everyone. I'm glad we kind of got through the wonderful nourishment of rain last night and got here this morning. I'm glad you're all here safe. And to those online, good morning. Welcome to you all. Introduction, my name is Thomas Diaz. My pronoun is he, him. I am the Director of Pastoral Care and of Parish Life. We are here gathered for our typical Sunday morning 9 a.m. faith and formation. And this particular morning, we're here to kind of gather for a very solemn and sacred subject, and that is a commemoration that happens on an annual basis, which is the Transgender Day of Remembrance. The official actual day of remembrance is November 20th, so this coming Thursday. And here at All Saints Church, we will do our own commemoration and observance of this sacred moment and time next Sunday at 5 p.m. So and it's in the bulletin, and hope that you may join us next Sunday as well. I'm here gathered with the LGBTQ leadership team, and they will come up throughout the presentation and to introduce themselves for this talk. A couple of things I want to do before we go to our opening prayer, and that is to say that there's a significance about us as being solidarity for this commemoration that we call Transgender Day of Remembrance. As a cisgender person myself, I think it's important to say that we shouldn't even have to be doing this at all. This should not have to be an annual commemoration that we do as beloved community. Though we do have a day, what we call a Transgender Day of Resilience and Joy, that happens on an annual basis, but ultimately, we should not have to do this. This is still very much, I'm going to use the word, the sin of humanity, that because we have to have a day of remembrance, that tells us that we're still at a place where we're choosing who's in and who's out, both as society, and most importantly, there's still that stain upon the church that still has reconciliation to do. So it still has to go through ongoing reconciliation for edging out and putting our transgender and non-binary siblings out in the margins. And though I'm relieved for us as Episcopalians and for us who are gathered at All Saints Church, and the reality is that that's still a very small and narrowed population of the church that would want to even recognize a day such as a Transgender Day of Remembrance. So my hope is that we get into some history about this day, ways that we, through our baptismal covenant, particularly the line respecting the dignity of every human being, that maybe that could be the influence as to how maybe just one day in our lifetime, this will not necessarily be necessary, but instead the flourishment and the joy of all human life is at the core of our faith and of our humanity. So I'm going to invite Kaya Duke, who's one of the co-chairs of our LGBTQ ministry, along with Billy Rayner, but Kaya is going to open us up in prayer.
Good morning, All Saints. Holy and loving God, you who created each of us in wonder, fashioning our bodies, identities, and spirits as reflections of your limitless image, gather us now in compassion and in truth. On this day of remembrance, we hold before you the lives of transgender and non-binary people who have been taken by violence, hatred, and indifference. We grieve the loss, and we grieve the systems that allowed such harms to take root. Open our hearts to wisdom. Open our souls to courage. Open our community to transformation. Bless our time together with honesty, tenderness, and hope. Make this space one of safety and deep belonging, where every person, especially our trans and non-binary siblings, is honored as your beloved child. May your spirit move among us, calling us toward justice, toward healing, and toward the fierce, liberating love that your gospel demands. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
So a little history about this Remembrance Day. It's actually fairly still new. Two decades in. 1999 was the first time in which any type of remembrance or actually vigil was held out on the streets. There are some history that's reflected from Stonewall that was fed into this remembrance out on the streets. I actually kind of did a little more deeper history on that, and actually the year after Stonewall, there was actually a vigil that happened right outside because there were attacks, particularly against Black trans women who were trying to preserve Stonewall, and many were brutally attacked by police and were murdered out in the streets. And there was a vigil that happened, but then after that, it kind of lay dormant. There was never such a vigil after that until 1999, when there was, ongoing murders of, particularly for Black and brown trans women out on the streets. And this is where a movement kind of started. It started with candlelight out on the street, and over the years, it has kind of built societal momentum. I will say that in which, particularly transgender remembrance from that vigil point, it was really the church, particularly progressive denominations, who started to recognize that this was a commemoration that should be part of any particular liturgical gathering. And we at All Saints too are one of those communities that said, why are we not doing this? We should at least be part of the commemoration and remembrance of our trans and non-binary siblings. And yet the reality, right, decades later, is that we're still at a place of trying to figure out what exactly are we trying to accomplish outside of remembrance when it comes to this Remembrance Day. I will say next Sunday, when we gather in the main sanctuary for our 5 p.m. service of remembrance, as we kind of been saying over the past couple of years that we've started the commemoration here at All Saints, the list of folks that we will remember has increased every year. And this particular year, I believe the statistics is that it's gone up by at least by 10%, at least from last year. Now, the first, in 1999, the idea of the remembrance was to recall how violently the murder of Rita Hester occurred. And we will remember next week in a particular calendar year everyone who had been murdered. But I will say one thing that we will not focus on this morning, nor we will next week, is the actual testimony of how these lives were taken from us. I can tell you they're awful. And if you were to actually read line by line how these murders, how violently these deaths are, I can assure you that you could want to place yourself in front of any government building, in front of the White House, and say this needs to stop. So the vigil that first started in 1999, what it is now in 2025, has increased from a place of just placing candles to remember, and it's also a day of action, of advocacy. And I dare to say, as people of faith, that again, as we have to do this year after year, and it's that list is not shrinking, but increasing, that we truly, as a faith community, need to ask that question, we need to stop this. So it is a time of lament and of justice and of remembrance. I also think it's a day for us, particularly as Episcopalians, to ask ourselves again, what is our core responsibility besides coming and gathering to prayer, to light candles, and to remember the litany of names that we have to recite every year. And I want to draw our attention to one of the Pacific responsibilities that actually is, personally think, a very easy, comprehensible, kind of low-hanging fruit, and that is because it's kind of built into our baptismal covenant of respecting the dignity of every human being. And I think this Transgender Day of Remembrance is kind of one of those, it's like that ding of a bell that vibrates throughout the day by saying, isn't this the call of our faith? Where is the dignity now, in this time? And I think what we'll tell is by that awful, gut-wrenching, long list of names that we will recite next week, it just says to us, we have a lot of work to do when it comes to bringing the dignity of every human being. I also think we have a responsibility in being, very forward-facing, being a people who actually stand in testimony by saying the reason why we do this commemoration, the reason why we're pleading with all of humanity to put this to an end is simply basic human rights, one, but two would be, particularly as people of faith, by saying we are distorting the image of God. That is at the core of what is happening. And I will say that we will continue to do this as long as we need to by holding this commemoration on an annual basis. But it does really beg the question, though, when we think about the image of God in each other, it's not enough just to come around the table of grace and mercy and light our candles and say, well, at least we remembered them. There has to be at some point, and all of us, whether it's we're writing a letter to government officials, signing petitions, whatever it may be, daring to put a transgender flag out in the garden as a symbol of that image of God. But there has to come a point where we're saying, just by having this commemoration, it's not enough. It's not enough. Because the image of God is being violently taken away from us. So I think the call and the responsibility is to recognize that through just our faith tradition and most importantly through this action that we call our baptism, it actually is to say to not us to be sitting here and worry like, gosh, what will we do? I think it is actually in our fingertips. The actions that are asked for us to do by standing for the dignity of every human being. I think about the work of Dr. Brene Brown, and I think it's that simple that she often states it throughout her work, is that we are wired for belonging, we're wired for love, and we're wired for connection. So I think in such a commemoration as Transgender Day of Remembrance, it just really does beg the question, what happened when we, I'm just saying as humanity, decided, as one of the many unfortunate long lists of those who are out in the margins, in the periphery of humanity, when did we conclude that particularly for our trans and non-binary siblings, that belonging, connection, and love was not necessary for them? These are questions we do need to wrestle with to truly to understand why we have to do this on an annual basis and what is our particular call to action as church. Now, there are some glimmer of hope that we need to recognize because and part of that hope is because we don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel on how to put this to an end. And one of the ways that I want to point out to us is that, the Episcopal Church at large has been at the forefront of asking the question, how can we put this to an end? And it really, up on the screen, I've kind of highlighted some General Convention resolutions that have been passed throughout at least 2 decades. And it just shows the fact that there is an open opportunity to continue on this work of showing to the world, particularly when many of our queer siblings, but particularly for our trans siblings who would dare to step into a church and feel that not, or they just welcomed, but that their humanity would be celebrated at the door. And I will say that the Episcopal Church, as the Episcopal Church, yes, embraces all people and our queer siblings and our trans siblings, but it does ask the question, though, or beg the question, what does the celebration of their humanity look like at the entrance of every door in the church? And it does also ask us, too, that just because we have had our wonderful and sacred milestones throughout the years here at All Saints, that we also, too, recognize that just because we have succeeded in many beautiful ways, in sacred and holy ways, we constantly need to examine what does that humanity look like right at the doorstep as folks are walking in. And I say that because here are some examples of how we can position ourselves as church, because it's been done. The charge is here. We have support for trans ordination, protect gender identity in our canons and the laws of the church. We have developed liturgies, which you can go to our website and they're there. They're beautifully made. And one of the most recent ones, the protect of our trans youth. And we know that that is for sure certain here at All Saints in our youth program as well. So kind of going back to the respect and dignity of every human being, then one of the best ways in which we can embody that particular covenant that we say is really going back and asking the question and how we can all be contributors to assuring no matter who that person is next to us, and yes, sometimes a challenge, particularly if they politically think differently and have other thoughts than we do, it does come back to that image of God in everyone. And that is, I believe, the sacred task at work for each and one of us as we ask the question, if the image of God is in everyone, then what can I do to assure that the dignity of our trans and non-binary siblings get to have a fair and equal life like everyone else? I want to share some quotes from trans faith leaders. These are kind of remarkable, and I'll kind of share who each person is that I kind of would like to share. Shannon Kearns is a Christian theologian. She's also a playwright and author. And she says trans bodies are sites of divine revelation. The Reverend Canon Dr. Cameron Patridge. He is a fellow Episcopalian clergy theologian, one of the first openly transgender priests to preach and to be recognized, an amazing human being. God meets us in transition, in the holy work of becoming. Rabbi Elliot Kula, the first openly trans rabbi, ordained in 2006. Becoming who we are is holy. Bambi Salido, who's actually here in Los Angeles, is the current president and CEO of Trans Latina Coalition. It's a really wonderful coalition here in LA. Another way for if you want to say, where's my advocacy going? Check them out. They're a wonderful group. She quotes, "We are more than statistics. We are a community full of sacred resilience." And a friend of All Saints, Austin Harkley, who's been here a couple of times in the pulpit, reminds us that transgender people are not a burden for Christianity or for the church. They come bearing gifts. I think one way that we can always kind of look to our faith as the North Star when it comes to our advocacy, it's pretty clear if we were to kind of lean on a kind of Jesus approach, that Jesus would not be silent in this moment, and nor has been. That the voice that proclaims the image of God needs to be louder than ever. We need to have a clear sense of what that solidarity work must look like. And I want to draw your attention to, I would like to think the difference between being ally or allyship and solidarity. Because those are two different expressions for each other. I would say that being an ally, first step, and it's actually a bit of an easy one if you are still trying to figure out what exactly, who am I standing for? I think an ally is just one of those, a way to kind of visually look at it. It's kind of, a shoulder, putting your hand around someone's shoulder saying, I see you. I see you. And I think many of us here at All Saints are really good at that, and thanks be to God. But I think there's a significant task still ahead for all of us, particularly for us cisgender people, the solidarity part. And the way that I would say to define the solidarity part, it's not just the arm around the shoulder. It is now, I'm going to hold your hand and I'm going to make sure that your life is protected. I'm going to assure that your life has meaning, and that I'm going to make sure that you are a safeguard from all the other garbage that's being said out there against you. That's the holding the hand part. And I think that why that's important, as we know, besides just being a good human being, a fellow person for someone else, is that I want us to kind of see that that's where that kind of line still, that divide is increasing. Because I think what probably ended up happening was that we thought, the allyship was enough. Just to place our arms around one's shoulder and saying, I hear you, I got you. But I think it's important for us to realize that at this point in time, when our trans siblings are being scapegoated by just gut-wrenching, awful rhetoric because for the sake of scapegoating, because, let's ignore what's over here, it's their fault. We need to hold hands. We need to make sure that our trans and non-binary siblings feel their safety in us. And I think the church also needs to extend that hand. Because the reality is that because Jesus is doing it already. And in some ways, we need to catch up. So true belonging for anyone doesn't require us to change who we are. It requires us to be who we are meant to be. Another way to look at this commemoration, this day of remembrance, it's just not the lives that we lost through violent attacks. It's actually a reminder for each and single one of us that if you ever had to think once, which I've had many times, and I'm sure many of us in this room have, what is the requirement to be me? I want us to really understand that for our trans siblings, for many, it's actually more of who can I be today without being hurt or killed out in the world for just being me. That's a harsh reckoning that many of us could look at the mirror and say, well, this is who I am. This is who I'm going to be out in the world today. Out I go. Imagine if you have to look in the mirror saying, for who I am today, will I make it home this evening? That's harsh. That's a reckoning. And to draw back to our faith, this day can also be a day that we say with full conviction of our core that Jesus is inviting us to say the authenticity aspect of see me in each other. See me in the list of names that we will recite next Sunday. The violent and awful list that we have to recite next Sunday. True belonging does not require you to change who you are. It requires you to be who you are. I think that's what we need to recognize about such a Remembrance Day. That many did not get to survive who they are. And instead, they were told, who you are is not sufficient enough for human life. Therefore, I will take care of it. That sin is grief, and that sin is deep. But the hope, as I pointed out earlier, is that what we have before us is a church that, again, needs to catch up because that hand of Jesus has been out the entire time. We just need to catch up to it and join that extension of hand. And I do ask that for us as cisgender folks that, again, that allyship, having one's arm around shoulder, beautiful. It's time to lock hands. To lock hands to assure that our trans siblings know their worthiness in the world, in society, and in our church. I believe that is our call to action as we do our remembrance. I think it's important to also hear from our trans siblings what this day means to them. I think about the sensitivity that goes into preparing for such a gathering, which we will do next Sunday. And it's not easy. It's actually quite and I will actually admit that this is a week that which we will go into final preparations for next Sunday. And I have no joy that I have to spend at least 8 hours this week preparing for next Sunday. It hurts the fact that I have to do this. But I pray that this time, when we show up next week, we're locking hands. We're joining that hand print that Jesus has already done for our trans siblings, because we do need to catch up. I do want to invite up our other co-chair of our LGBTQ ministry, Billy Rayner. Billy, to come and introduce who you are to us. And yes, praise to Billy, vestry member, amazing witness to our ministry, and I did, get consent from Billy. Her and I were texting yesterday, and I just said, if you feel comfortable enough, and she said yes, to kind of share what this commemoration means to you, and to share with us what do we need to know.
Thank you, Thomas. Hi, I'm Billy Rayner, trans woman, pronouns she, her, co-chair of the LGBTQ ministry along with Kaya. I think for me, Trans Day of Remembrance, for me, it's kind of a fairly new thing, probably because I didn't know about it, for probably most of my life, because I lived most of my life just so deep in the closet. But it did become a big part of my life probably about 5 years ago, whenever I just really started actively transitioning or just exploring what that meant for myself and everyone around me. But actually, like, being a part of it and remembering those folks. Too low. All the shorties around here. But maybe it's just me. I haven't really been super active with TDOR until I think 3 years ago, whenever I first started coming here, whenever I attended the service here. And for me, it was very moving, not only to remember just all of the folks that were removed from us over that past year, but also it makes me think of the trans folks that haven't been able to come out, because they are also forgotten. A lot of them are very well unnamed, unfortunately, and very well unknown. So I often think about them. I even think about, like, this is maybe even more of a newer thought for myself. I start thinking about the remembrance of my old self, even, because there was a life there that, meant things to people and got me to where I'm at now. So I start to think about the person that I was and that got me here. But really just giving space for the folks, for everyone here or whoever's there to just hear those names and put them in their hearts, that means a lot to me. Yeah, thank you.
Transition to a lower mic. All right. Indeed. So as we prepare to kind of wrap up, I think it's important we do have some, again, action and advocacy plan, and Kai, if you want to come join me on this. So I would say that right now, as redundant as it is, but we know the impact, sign every single petition you can find. Putting your name on those petitions actually does make a huge significant difference, and it adds pressure to a system that would say, let's just continue to make our trans and non-binary siblings second class. So do fill them out. I also want to direct you to, particularly here in LA, there's the Trans Latina Coalition, which I mentioned earlier. It's a wonderful organization. I'm sure your donations would be lovely receptive for them and all of their petitions that they have. The LGBTQ Center out in Hollywood has a remarkable trans program that actually takes folks off of the streets, it gets them into both medical and housing and all of just the necessities for life. And so do look into that. And then you want to share?
Yeah, and then there have been some things done here at All Saints as well. I think back in 2018, and now it's still on the website. Hannah Earnshaw, pronouns they, them, worked to write an essay and record it as a podcast as well. So if you go to the All Saints website and search Pronouns 101, if you have questions about pronouns or know someone who does, you're like, I just need a quick refresher. They have a lovely short podcast and essay describing that. And then we've also got some information about like what does it mean to be queer and what does it mean to be trans and like the intersection of that and the church and kind of some like FAQs also.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And then lastly, if please join us next Sunday at 5 p.m. And I will say that the remembrance here at All Saints actually has evolved over time, at least in our time here. Actually, it was Hannah Earnshaw and myself that actually were the kind of first kind of folks that kind of were putting more emphasis to do it. It started outside around the oak tree with candlelight. And then we got this wild idea of like, we should probably go inside the church and use the altar. And then last year we did Eucharist, and we're going to do it again this year. And I say that because it just speaks about how, again, I wish we didn't have to do this at all. But the significance of this day of remembrance has evolved to a place where the image of God is truly surrounding us that day. So please do join us next Sunday at 5 p.m. And yes, please.
Two other things. So Thomas has talked about things like taking action and doing things and the importance of belonging and being able to show up as you are, who you are, any day of the week. And we do have two things. So every Tuesday we have an LGBTQ plus sharing small group here. And that's one of the first things that I found when I first started coming. Billy Rainier co-facilitates with another lovely person in our community. It is excellent. So really highly encourage anyone who is looking for a space, especially our trans and non-binary siblings, to come and join us then to just share about your highs, lows, and plateaus of the last week. We also have some Christmas cards here that we started working on last night at our Friendsgiving potluck that we will be sending to Men's Central, specifically to the LGBTQ plus unit, and to the trans and non-binary siblings who are there as well. So if you'd like to make a little Christmas card, we're going to have these available just after this faith and formation session and at our Trans Day of Remembrance service next Sunday at 5 p.m. also. So if you'd like to make a card, feel free to do that.
Awesome. Thank you, Kaya. Thank you for being here before we continue our prayer and being church, and to kind of close us up, invite Liz, another member of our leadership team, to close us in prayer.
Thanks, Thomas, and thank you, everyone, for coming and being here. My name is Liz. My pronouns are she, her. God, who transcends time and space, who transformed from the Word to be made flesh, who was transfigured on the mountaintop before Peter, James, and John, who transubstantiates the bread and wine into the most holy body and blood of Christ, who translates the good news of the apostles across languages, God of mercy and justice and unfailing presence. As we prepare to move out from this space, we give thanks for the unique way you reveal your image in your beloved trans children, our beloved trans siblings. We also grieve for our trans siblings who have been taken from us, extinguishing the unique way they brought your light into our world. Hold them in the eternal light of your love. Let their memories be a blessing that calls us to action. Strengthen all of us to confront violence and injustice wherever they appear. Give our cisgender siblings the courage to stand with our transgender and non-binary siblings with humility, persistence, and joy. Heal the wounds we carry, those we have suffered and those we have caused, and those we have ignored. Send us out as people of resurrection hope, people committed to dignity, people shaped by compassion, people who believe that every life is sacred. Let your blessing rest upon all trans and non-binary people in our community and beyond, granting safety, joy, belonging, and abundant life. And may we, your church, ever widen our welcome and belonging, ever deepen our love, and ever follow the path of your liberating grace. Amen.
We'll see you in church. Have a good day.